lot of times we look back in feedback sessions and we're pretty scathing.
This is Raz. He's a staple of the LCS broadcast for the past few years now. He's known worldwide as funny, charismatic, hardworking, and one of the most honest personalities in the scene. He's completed the League of Legends gauntlet, having coached the Dignitas team responsible for the worst play of all times with the quadruple execute in one game. He's casted in many regions, including the LPL and the LCS, and he brings a lovable personality for LCS fans and Americans at large. In this episode of the LS Show, we talk about the process of coming up with ideas for the LCS broadcast.
A lot of it feels like, and I'm just saying it from my perspective, it starts from us analysts saying what we want.
The hidden struggles and difficulties of making good content that the fans don't really get to see. Your talking was actively taking away from what was happening on the screen.
Yep. I'm like, oh no! What am I supposed to do?
The failures of the LCS broadcast.
We need to promote ourselves better, and we need to have...
And some hilarious examples of how Raz got so good at doing what he does.
Someone just sees your disgusting teeth. Immediately, that's not the way you want to present yourself.
All right, so you've been working with the LCS broadcast now for since 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So that's 3 years.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit about how the structure works? Like, who makes the executive vision decision, saying okay, from 2022 to 2023, we really changed things up. There's no longer an analyst desk. There's no host. It's very different. The skits that you guys do are different. The between game has gotten shorter. A lot of things have changed. Who's the person in charge of that? Is there a person up top that says, this is the vision that I have, this is what we're gonna do, or is it a combination of efforts? How does that work? Could you explain that?
I'd definitely say it's a combination. A lot of it feels like, and I'm just saying it from my perspective, it starts from us analysts saying what we want. And a lot of the times, everybody, including the community, always says, hey, we want more content. We want more content coming out of the broadcast, either on broadcast or outside of broadcast that we can send on YouTube. I think those are, demands that are obviously clear from the community and us as, working on the show. So that's one. In terms of who actually makes the call, I'm sure higher ups that I don't even know, or maybe I do know them, but they're in meetings and I can't really identify. But I ultimately understand and agree with a lot of the decisions that are made. So I remember when I joined up, it was I think it was called LCS for All, and it was a bunch of analysts that were coming in, different mix-ups throughout the day, different hosts throughout the day. So it's just a bunch of guests, and I was coming in maybe a few times with either Emily or Hi or something, right? That was the idea behind it. And I thought at first, understood the goal, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite fun working with different people every day that had different visions. So you can basically, it was a different challenge, which I enjoyed. But then you realize very quickly the synergy that a desk can create, much like the NBA on TNT desk that everybody enjoys. I love the hell out of it. Or even just NBA, NHL and CBC, those kind of rapports are only made off of working with someone consistently. Some of the best color casters and play-by-play combinations they're great because they understand each other to the nth degree. So I think when the next year when they moved away from that, I understood that too. So it's every decision I understand and I agreed with. But I never really know who makes the call. That's a new thing to me too, because back in the LPL, I was in those meetings where I'm I'm either part of the decision or know directly who's making the decision, but no, in this case, not me.
Okay, that's interesting that you say about the LPL. If you remember back in the LPL, you had a session. I think there was only 7 episodes, but you had Raz's recaps.
Yes.
Did you push for that? Was that something they pushed for?
It was a bit of both. I actually really wanted to push for it because even though I think personally recap content is, kind of the lowest form of content generally, because you can always make more interesting content. I thought recap content for LPL was really important because there were a ton of games, literally games every day that we're not even covering on the broadcast for the English broadcast. So basically there would be a lot of games people would miss. And the games were happening in hours that North American audiences would not be able to watch. European audiences is different, but especially the North American audience and the Latin American audience, they wouldn't catch. So I was okay, I want to make content that's concise, to the point, highlights the most important games, and then on top of that, I wanted to add in like who is the MVP of the week, like just like players to watch out for. So when an international happens, fans who are watching casually or not watching at all can identify this is the best player in the year because he was highlighted multiple times on YouTube content that like I had consumed. So I thought it was perfect for the LPL. The challenge was getting it out there because at the time we did have a YouTube channel, but
Mm.
it was not really run by anybody. And so what ended up happening was somebody who I worked alongside that was already overworked, that was did production side and also worked on the YouTube channel. Um, Basically was throwing out recap videos that were weeks old. So like it just wasn't relevant by the time that it was sent out. And also even me being able to communicate to the contractors like what my vision was difficult. So I thought it was a good idea at the time, but the execution of it didn't end up working out positively. But I really liked the idea of the show.
I agree. It's funny that you mentioned the NBA. The NBA sort of has, like on Undisputed, they'll do certain types of recaps like that, and then they'll go into a discussion, and that's what I thought you were going with. I
Yeah.
must say, like, it was really bad, the your recaps, especially the first
Yep.
few episodes where it was like your talking was actively taking away from what was happening on the screen.
Yep.
And you fixed that. You fixed that towards the end. You're like, okay, I'm just going to cast what's happening, like explain what's happening. It did improve, but I thought there was a lot of zoom ins onto your face on like a weird angle, and it's like really taking away from what's happening. I just remember this because I was like, I can't, like, I love the LPL. It's awesome, but
It's actually so funny. Actually, this is hilarious. So, the first episode, the idea was, hey, the contractors, the producers that I'm going to be working with, like I will have like a translator with me to be able to communicate what my goal is. I go into the room, there's no translator. So I'm like, oh no, what am I supposed to do? So like me communicating to them what I actually wanted from the episode was near impossible. By the end of it, when I was basically adding into who the MVP of the week was, they were starting to wrap up, put all the equipment away. I was like, no, guys, this is the part I wanted to do. So like that part was hard, and also the hardest part for me was, um, so the studio for that show was taking place in the ordinary LPL casting studio, which sounds great and all, but during the games we would have like a monitor right in front of us, and there's a monitor literally across the room that was just showing basically confidence monitor. That was like if we're looking at the camera, we can see if the camera is showing us on broadcast. I had to use that to talk about the games while it was happening, to talk about the clips. They would make the clips, put it in the screen. Sometimes I wouldn't agree with the clips. I was like, oh, that clip didn't really highlight the most important part, but I couldn't see it before I was in the studio. So like I I'm not lying when I said the first few weeks was disastrous. It was really hard to coordinate, but I ended up doing a few things. They were really, really kind. And so not only were I sending my own clips for each of the highlights so that that immediately was covered, and I thought it talked about the most important parts from that point forward, but also I had a translator that can be able to talk about the MVP aspect, so I can talk about the ending of the episode. I cleaned up basically the intro because I didn't have a teleprompter, so I was just doing it all off the top of my head. So there was a lot to learn off of not only just communicating in front of a camera for a monitor that's 10 miles away without really a teleprompter to work off of, but also just like building the episode up with and collaborating with a bunch of people. I enjoyed it. It was definitely an experiment. I'm glad that not a lot of people saw the first few episodes. I don't think people should ever go back and watch it. But when it got to a pretty good degree, like a good point was like week 5, 6, around there. Then I was like, okay, that's good. But by that point, we still weren't getting it out to people, so that sucked.
yeah, it's very interesting hearing about sort of the constraint. One of my goals for this interview was talking about like we keep talking about do more content,
Yes.
and sometimes it falls flat, and the reasons might not be because hey, I just don't know how to do content. It's like, well, I wanted to do it, but then the screen was over there and the camera was on the other side, so it was getting the back of my head, and then I was like, I was
Yeah.
turning around and I knocked over this, the microphone, and then we didn't have a microphone, and it's like, there's so much that goes on that we don't see that, and I think it's important for people to understand that.
Mhm.
So, talk me through the skits that happened in the summer of LCS. I personally felt like maybe there were budget cuts. A lot of the things that I feel like were done afterwards, like it was very weird seeing this or that being done on broadcast instead of outside. The fact that Pastry and Dash were like kind of cut. Dash stopped doing content with the LCS. I know he did some stuff with CLG, and then he was like just showing up for finals. I don't know if it was budget cuts or just like you guys didn't agree with or want to do something different, but it seemed like the content of the LCS, the skits were really improving. But there were like also constraints around there that I sort of want to understand what was going on there.
Oh, so I think it depends on. I know you mentioned this or that, and I think the biggest change was just where it was being done. Because this or that was like a YouTube specific content that came out weekly, whereas now they put it on the broadcast. Now, I don't know I wasn't a part of the reasoning because I'm not really a part of this or that, but I do know that the idea going into this split was if we have good content, put it on the broadcast, which does innately mean that we'll have, I guess, lower budgets for it because it's just going to be now broadcast content, which means that it's not going to be like super polished, edited, stuff like that. So those are going to be the pretty like the constraints from having content being pushed on broadcast. And it could just be recorded content, to be fair. Recorded content put on broadcast is another thing that we have still been doing. So I don't think it's a budget cut thing. I think it was just choices for some of our existing pieces of content that was just living on the YouTube channel. And honestly, I thought it was just kind of dying on the YouTube channel. I don't really like content that exists that's really well done, but not really shown to the wider broadcast. So a good example I would say is, damn, when was Mundo Dodgeball made? I actually
I
do
was
not
gonna
remember.
mention that. Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
was towards the end of summer.
Okay, so there it is. So we had like good pieces of content that we were able to push, but then there were some ideas that we as talent had uh, that were like, oh damn, where does this live? Does it live as separate piece of content with like uh, one production team, or does it live on the broadcast? And ultimately, a lot of our choices were, no, this is going on the broadcast, including I think it was the triathlon that we had. The
Yeah.
triathlon idea I thought was great. But it was kind of made up on the spot, and we were like, well, the idea was made up after a few weeks, but in terms of pushing it on the broadcast and having an entire broadcast day to the triathlon day, that part was kind of put together. So like, maybe a week or 2 weeks in advance. So maybe not it can't really compare to our other theme days. But to make it simple, I think it was less about the budget and more about like where we were putting it, because we were making a bunch of content. Some of them were cut because either it was maybe too budget. Like when I say too budget, sometimes we just couldn't get players for skits that were based solely around players. So we just had a bunch of content. So if you had a specific content in mind that you thought was cut based off budget, you can mention to me. I don't think it was an issue of budget for me.
Oh, I thought this were that the reason it was moved off of YouTube. My understanding was like, okay, Freak retires, then you get rid of Dash, Pastry Time, and then you're bringing up all these academy like casters, um, you know, supposedly on a lower rate, and then you have this or that instead of being on the weekend. All of a sudden, it's being put in the broadcast. Does that mean you're no longer asking Kobe and Jat to come in on a weekend and pay them a different rate? All of a sudden, it's part of the broadcast. It's lower quality because you're doing it live. I'm not sure. I thought it was live. Maybe it was recorded because some of them were like
It
about
was
the next
live. It was
game. So
live.
I thought it was
Because
live.
no, that one is live. So this or that specifically is a live hit. That one specifically has nothing to do with budget. It
Okay.
was just that they moved it to be a live show on the broadcast. So I don't think that one was about budget as well, especially the idea about having new talent like Rafa and some like guest talent that were coming in from NACL. That one to me is not about budget. You're right. When Freak retires, we need someone to fill that spot, and Rafa put in a great amount of work in NACL as the best play-by-play in my eyes when I was watching. So I thought it was a natural move to move him up. In fact, specifically on that, some of my hangups over the years is that I felt like some of the North American academy talent, wasn't getting an opportunity to show their work. And I thought that NACL really improved to make it so that's their product that they can really push what they've been working on. But then we got someone like Rafa to be able to be on the LCS broadcast for it. So I think I don't believe that one is a budget either, and I don't think at all this or that was budgeted. That's just on me. I can think if you point to another talent like content piece, then that'd probably be a different issue altogether. But not that one.
So you had mentioned something about separating, like, do we want this to be a YouTube skit or do we want this to be on the broadcast? Like, I think the LCS has done an amazing job in 2023, and kudos to the four of you and whoever is like working as well
Mhm.
on making the LCS entertaining to watch. Like once I'm there, you kept me longer in 2023 than 2022, coming from someone who watched every single game both years. But
Yeah.
the in between, like if IMT and Dig played a game, I'm not necessarily interested in the pre-game or the post-game. But now I don't know. Maybe the post game is like catching up with Double Lift segment with like Jojo Pune or something, and the pregame might be C9 members just taking over the room and talking about them. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, Evanes is just like saying I don't know to every single question. This is hilarious, you know, like
Yes.
it could just be that. So I am interested in watching. But what I think that LCS didn't do, in my opinion, is that it didn't bring people to watch the actual broadcast. It felt like
Mm.
you spent all this time improving the broadcast, but there was no time bringing people to watch the broadcast. I felt like if you looked at the LCS channel, you looked at their TikTok, you looked at like Twitter, there was nothing that was like hyping me to like watch a game, or after a game is done. I thought this and that, not this and that. The Dive did a good job of like recapping, but it was never like chopped up where it's like, okay, this is like the highlight of the match. We have EG is going to play C9 and C9 is calling EG frauds. And like that was never really highlighted. It was talked about for 5 minutes and it kind of died off and maybe brought back up on the broadcast, but it never like was used to bring people to the broadcast. I thought that the LPL, for example, did a better job at that. My guess was that, I mean, this, as you're saying, maybe it's not how I guessed it. I'm just a fan. But I thought that the LCS was like pushing everything to be done on the broadcast, and all the like external content isn't really happening. And maybe that's not necessarily true. What do you think the difference between, why is it just why is it why is it the broadcast or YouTube and not like we're going to do the broadcast, we're going to get a really good broadcast, and then we're going to make really good content that's going to lead into the broadcast?
So I think we did do that because like the content that you mentioned did still live on YouTube. So the goal was to try and do both. That being said, the feeling that you have about bringing fans in is a real one. The idea of promoting our show on Twitter, on YouTube, especially on Reddit and TikTok, those are all channels that I think we need to do better at and modernize a bit more. A lot of the content, if you look on YouTube or on Twitter, it's like the skits that not the skits, but the hype videos that we have. They're kind of like I don't want to say archaic, but they're old school and they're not authentic to who the players are. And also, what has changed from me from being a fan in 2013, 12, all that, to now are the players don't also promote their own games naturally, which is like streaming. So streaming, having or tweeting, just basically being a natural personality to get people invested in you. Uh, that actually hurts over time because once those players retire, like we just had Doublelift officially retiring last year, we had Bjergsen retiring in spring. We're having big names that were also pretty large, tweeters, streamers, people who are influential in the community, take a step back. And what we have right now are very talented players, but also players that aren't promoting themselves. So we need to do a lot of that. So I think what's hurting right now and what we need to improve on is if we're making content, we're pushing that everywhere. We're pushing it on TikTok. We're pushing it on Reddit. On the right times, by the way, we're trying to promote our players specifically because to the one thing that you mentioned, which is helping the broadcast, is if let's say like the bottom two teams are playing against each other, and we're putting out entertaining content that's not necessarily hyping those players up. Yes, it's bringing a lot of eyes and entertainment to that part of the broadcast, but then those two bottom tier teams are not really being talked about. And so let's say a good example is like IMT and FlyQuest were the two bottom tier teams. Now we're still talking about FlyQuest because there were still fans there. But for IMT, let's just say a great example is like Tactical, a player who I'm sure is going to be on teams going forward because he's a talented player. But if we're never getting a chance to really talk about him and hype him up, and of course he's not streaming as much, and he's like these kind of things are happening, then where is the interest going to come from? Where are people gonna find the interest in watching him in the future? Let's say he's put on a good team again in 2024. Well, we haven't really done and put in the work in the past few years to kind of build him up. So it's a push and pull where yes, you're creating an entertaining product, but then you're not using that time to kind of give people interest in that player. And of course, on top of that, with all that being said, teams churn literally every year. Every year and every split, it feels like every team is changing 3 positions. So it's hard to keep people interested. So those are all challenges. I think the easiest one to hit is just being a lot better at promoting our players and games off the broadcast. Like a goal that I have personally is I'm going to stream a lot more about the games. I'm going to stream a lot more personally about the players. If a player did something really good in a game, I want to highlight that and make that content on my own Twitter, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And I think that's going to really generate interest from our fans to, especially casual fans, turning casual fans into fans of a player. It's not easy, but I don't think that's a I don't personally think that's because of the choices that the broadcast has made. I think that's just a natural challenge that we have with our league. So that's I think that's the only thing that I can really say. Unless if you have any follow-ups, actually, I'm interested in that.
I think a big,
Mhm.
yeah, I think a big part. I actually made a video on this. Is that I think the teams aren't doing due justice to their, like when you say how are we going to talk about IMT if we're just doing entertaining content? Well, that's where IMT comes in and highlights insanity when they had insanity,
Yeah,
highlights tactical and highlights all
yeah,
these players. Highlights their key player in revenge that they kept and then kicked all of a sudden. I think that's where that comes in. I don't think that it should just be the broadcast's sort of role, um, because they have the broadcast is like going on for like 5-6 hours, right?
yeah,
Twice a week or 3 times a week. I think that there's a lot of opportunity outside of broadcast, like having a show just talking about the day. Like, for example, the NBA AT&T broadcast that they have, where they're just talking about the most hype games. They're bringing people
yeah,
up to date with certain things. Undisputed, where you just have people that are debating things that sometimes honestly silly, but hey, it gets people to watch. It's clickbait, and then I end up going back and watching the game because I'm like, wait, what happened? Why did they lose the game? So I do think that it's more of a question of like, how do we do both rather
yeah.
than how do we do one or the other? I do want to also ask you, like, how do you improve on what you're doing? Because you mentioned that you have like specific goals. Raz in 2019 and Raz in 2023, I can tell you for sure, someone who watched you both times, you're a lot
Yeah.
better at what you do right now.
Hmm.
Like, it's probably not even close. Not saying that you were bad back then, but like you've improved a lot. I think one thing that you've improved on a lot is being more impromptu. There's a lot of these segments where it's like, okay, I'm going to go in front of the teleprompter and it's going to give me a random player and I'm going to say why he's MVP. And I feel like when you have to do things on the fly, you're a lot better
Yeah.
than you were in 2019. How do you, as a broadcast, just improve? Like, what metrics do you follow? How do you say, oh, Raz has like improved this? Like, how do you do that?
That's a great question. I think I know for sure when I started out in 2016, I was god awful. I was ass. And what it came from was, yes, I had done a lot of analyst work, coaching work, but being in front of a broadcast and saying your ideas is pretty difficult. I was pretty camera shy. I realized that late on. I was like, wait a minute, I'm in front of a camera and I'm freezing up. It's not good. Um, and also, you can talk for however long you want in front of a team, and you're not going to get dinged for time or anything like that. People understand what you're saying. But if you're in front of a cast and the game's actively moving along, well, you need to be quick. You need to get your point out. And also, you need to be a lot less wishy-washy. Like when I'm in front of a team, I can go on and like, oh, this is great, except for when this happens and this happens and this happens. But when you're on broadcast, you actually have to cut that fluff out completely, unless you have a lot of time to do so. So from 2019, I was focusing mostly on my casts, and even then, I wasn't necessarily amazing at it. I wasn't great at it. A lot of the reasons were some of the reasons you're mentioning right now, the impromptu stuff. I think the biggest change I had made is just being a lot more comfortable saying whatever I feel. Um, wherever I am, right? And just having that trust within me that I'm not going to say the wrong things or something. And if I do like mess up once, then I learn from it. I think that's the easiest thing immediately. Also, from 2019 to 21 or even, I had realized some core weaknesses in my own work. I had oftentimes when I'm improving, I make documents. I work on early game plan. I mean, um, early goals, midterm goals, and late term goals. The early goals are pretty easy to hit. It's like, oh, I'm not feeling focused on broadcast. Well, damn it, like wake up earlier, eat breakfast, like meditate if you have to. So get your early mornings proper so the rest of the game, like the rest of the week, you're working properly. I think the biggest one for me was knowing where I'm ending my sentences and stuttering. Stuttering still happens because a lot of the times you are figuring out while you're answering a question how to get there. But man, I stuttered a lot, and also man, I mumbled a lot, and so I kind of asked myself, who did I closely resemble? Like who's my work? I would say closer to. Um, I thought Kobe because Kobe was a really exciting, excitable caster that cared a lot about player stories, and I thought the way that he talked about certain things was like, oh, I'm closer to that. I'm gonna listen to him a little bit. I'm gonna listen to Jat or Vedius a little bit because their delivery is so spot on a lot of the times on broadcast. Um, and then I went and expanded a little bit to sports. So like Bomani Jones, I don't know if you know him, an incredible sports radio guy that was on ESPN. I don't know if he's still on ESPN now, but I was like, Stephen A. and Bomani Jones, I think, are two people who are incredible in front of a camera. Stephen A. can, if he sees something that is ridiculous and has to respond to something off the cuff on the fly, I think he is A plus at that. Um, and then I think Bomani Jones is somebody that basically can. I think what I took from him is uh, tone a lot of the times, and I took from him kind of something similar, which is, hey, someone has just asked you on the radio about like a player, and you have to think your like basically speak your thoughts on him succinctly. I think he gets his theme across immediately. He says what he thinks right off the bat, and then he explains afterwards. I think a lot of people explain their thought process immediately and then forget about or need to path back to what their thesis is. So it's important to get your thesis out there. And then Max Kellerman. Max Kellerman, actually, it was more of a mechanical thing that he does. While someone is speaking, basically his co-host or whoever, in that case it was Stephen A, he is jotting down notes because he's already preparing his argument, his response. And I think a lot of the times people wait for the end of someone speaking to then formulate your own thoughts instead of, oh, he's going in that direction, talking about a player. He's saying they suck because of they can't CS well or their positioning team fights was improper. They're probably going to continue on and talk about the reasoning for maybe like 30 more seconds. I can already start preparing my ideas, either take notes on a notebook or start thinking about that personally. So for me, I take improvement really seriously. I track it pretty like week by week, and I thought that you're right. The impromptu stuff. I did something also a pretty stupid game personally, which is when you wake up in the morning, find the first inanimate object and then talk about like try and sell the object to somebody or talk about why you like that object. I'm taking a shower, I see shampoo, I'll say why I like this shampoo and why I chose this brand over something else. And it's not something serious. I'll be like, I just walked into a convenience store, saw it. It was the first thing I saw. I picked it up. I bought it. Because I really needed the repetition to start training and practice casts. So I always find something. If I have free time, I try and be productive with it.
Can we do one of those impromptu 30 seconds right now?
Oh,
Can I give you something?
What? Give it to me.
Floss.
Floss?
Yeah.
Oh my God. What are you trying to do with your life if you're not flossing? Like, think about okay, I'll just say this. Think about you're going outside, someone just sees your disgusting teeth. Immediately, that's not the way you want to present yourself. Or let's say you're going on a date. You didn't floss before you went on a date. Guess what? You're not getting a second date. You're not getting a third date. It's just not happening. So just in general, it's something that I forget. I know the dentist says to floss daily. Sadly, I don't floss daily. I floss it probably every other day. But I brush regularly. I use mouthwash regularly. And guess what's right next to the mouthwash? The floss. It's a number one way to motivate yourself to floss. Or just to someone telling you that you have some ugly ass teeth. That's another way to do that as well.
That was pretty good. That was
So
pretty good. I'll be honest.
I stumbled a little bit, but I still hit the mark. So
Yeah, you definitely
I think
did.
those challenges are really important if you want to work on just being a lot more off the cuff and impromptu, because there's gonna be a lot of things in life that's surprising you.
So I see that you're really focused on improving like the entertainment value, like on improving how you deliver points, and all
Yeah,
of these things are things that you might in the entertainment industry is something you might focus on. You used to be a coach.
yeah,
Oh, you coached Dignitas, didn't you?
yeah. I did.
That year, the year with Renegades, the infamous Dig Renegades game. Were you the
Yeah, that
coach?
moment. I was the coach in that exact moment.
Oh no!
Unfortunately, it was
Oh
sad.
no!
You want me to tell you about that day?
I would love that, and then I'll get
All
back to
right.
my point.
Okay, because there were some teams that in scrims we had trounced. Renegades, I thought was a team that I respected them quite a bit, but we had a really, I felt like a positive win rate versus that team in scrims. And also this was around the lane swap meta, so we knew very well kind of like what our draft was going to look like before the draft, like the idea behind it, and there was a pretty high chance that we were going to lane swap. So we're like, okay, we're on stage. We've already kind of drilled in like some lane swap elements in scrims. We have to do it again on stage. And we did it before the games happened, and it worked out perfectly. I'm like, it won't go. There's no way we fucked this up. So I'm watching this in the back with the Renegades coach. I was friends with him, Hermes the Turtle. You're not getting away from this one, Hermes. And we were watching this on the big screen in a more public setting. So, like, any player can kind of watch on that same TV monitor. In fact, the two teams, I forget who it was, that were playing next. I believe one of them was Echo Fox, was right behind us. But they came in after the incident had already happened. We had died to the turret bot lane. We had still gotten the turret. It was an execute, so it wasn't awful, but it was still embarrassing.
It was a double
Um,
execute too.
yeah, it was. It was awful. But like, God, at least we had gotten the playoff, but in the worst way possible. And if that had been it, I don't think people would be talking about it as much. But no, camera pans up top lane, and the Renegade side just died a Herald, which is just worse. They wasted time on not being able to pick up Herald. I was like, oh, hell no. And while it was happening, I was talking to Hermes. I was like, we had talked about this prior. Like, I was embarrassed at the time. And then when the top lane thing happened, Hermes was like, oh no, we had literally talked about telling the AD carry to come if you feel like you can't do it on your own. And so we were both just like defeated. Two teams come up right behind us. They were trying to put two and two together because it's like, okay, so the kills do not match the kill count at the top because that's executes. That it doesn't count. They were confused, like, what happened? And we just did not respond. We were like, yep, you're going to have to go back and find that out on your own.
Oh,
So
that's hilarious.
it was unfortunate. And that was during a time in which, like, us on Dig just had some really unlucky. And when I say unlucky, like, we just didn't execute in some of our games. So we had, like, the game versus Immortals where we were, like, 10K up. They had not lost the game, I don't think, at that point. And we were destroying them. We were on top inhib, and then we, like, died. They're like, okay, so we made a mistake up top side. And then we had made another mistake. I think it was around Baron, and then we died. And I was like, oh, no, we're losing the game in 5 minutes, meaning we had dominated for the first 15. So a lot happened in that split. But, yeah, that was a great lesson for me because it was, for me, I was a rookie coach. I can easily say back then I was ass. I was more of an analyst, a head analyst, and I'd done some coaching for what's it called, teams remotely, like the Chiefs Esports Club and Dignitas Europe that ended up turning into Splice. But all of that was remote. But being in person was something that was not prepared for. So, God, that's a memory for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. I thank you for sharing that. But yeah, you coached. Mark had previously been a coach,
Yeah.
analyst, Jat as well. And I think Emily is just, I don't know if she coached, but she's always been an analyst.
Yes.
You guys are the four main people that are shown on broadcast,
Mhm.
excluding casters. Where do you position actual entertainers, like people who might not be analysts or work with teams or be analytical about the game, but they're professional entertainers? Like, I know you guys brought Cutie a couple of times, Cinderella. and I thought, what she was very charismatic and brought like a vibe to the broadcast that
Yeah.
was quite refreshing. But I understand the appeal of having analysts be entertainers as well, but I do think that there's a place for actual analysts, and it seems like you're also looking out to different people to get inspiration from. I feel like the broadcast could really benefit from people who are entertainers first. I don't know how
Oh,
you
so
feel
you're
about that.
so you think is your question more so like finding more entertainers first and then analysts second, or analysts first and then entertainers second?
No,
Because
I'm sorry.
everybody has. Mhm.
Yeah, entertainer first, and then maybe not even analytical. Maybe just someone who's like diamond or plat in
Mhm.
league, understands the champions, understand how the game is supposed to be played. But when it comes to like skits, or it comes to really entertaining and bringing out personality and having fun with the players and making
Yeah.
the broad like I like that you guys went from we're gonna be professional NBA to hey, this is a Twitch stream. Like,
Yeah.
let's acknowledge that and let's have fun. Let's sit on a couch, and have fun. And I think that there's room for that. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, do you guys feel like there's room for that? If not, why?
I think there's room in that. I think that's where the guests come in. Because one thing that is, I would say, the biggest challenge on being like on a broadcast like this is that there are going to be a lot of people that are league purists that are like, I only want to hear analysis about the game, and I want you to have a lot more telestrator segments, or people that are like, no, I just want to have fun. Like, I just want to see something that's just straight up like fucking entertaining. Um, so it's hard to bring in that balance, and I think guests come in is probably the biggest one. You're right about Cutie Cinderella. So her like tea time with Cutie was great. Her interviews on stage were great. And I think when Obly came on and her thing was just content. So like the content ideas that we had, the granny shoot with Mark Z, that was pretty funny, and that was hilarious. And there was one where I think Emily was standing on top of Avali and she just like supposed to punch me. It was like this weird segment about like, oh, it was the handshake incident with Sven and
Oh
um
yeah.
yes, actually I remember that one. That one was fun. So like to answer your question, I think that's where the guests come in. I do think there's a place for like an entertainer first, and that's usually where a host or interviewer, just someone that's like takes that position. That's like a perfect place for them. But they, that's just not the direction that we went in, and so we were having guests come in regularly to kind of fill in that gap. So we're either going to have in players that are obviously going to talk about the game more closely, and we can build up their brand, or we're gonna have someone who is a solid entertainer. Even Courage wanted to come up and cast. That was pretty sick. So I think we welcome that. It's just the fashion in which we do it to make it a lot more new, like, because that's what people are looking for when they come in and they see a new flavor. We want that to be still interesting and new. So I would say that's the goal. Unless you mean like, I know you're probably referencing more like a permanent guest
Mm-hmm.
on there, but I don't have the answer to that one.
Okay. I also think that I don't know. I feel like the broadcast can sort of go whichever direction it wants, and it can always
Yeah.
supplement whatever they don't have on the main broadcast with supplemental content. If they feel like there wasn't enough, telestrator like analytical, talk during the broadcast, well then you can have like a show after the games, like the day after, just talking
Yeah.
analytically about the games, and then maybe the day before games, you have another show where you're just talking about matchups and trying to bring people in and whatnot. I think that at least personally, I always think of like, why don't we do both?
Yes.
Instead of okay, we really need to pick one. It's like okay, how can we make both work? And then if we can't, then we have to stick with one.
Yeah. I think we've done that. Like the Telestrator segments, like for instance, like we see Emily on a Telestrator segment pretty much daily on the broadcast. Same with me. I think the challenge is more so where we placed it. Um, we've looked at the the metrics on which content actually worked out quite well. Now I can't remember it off the top of my head. Not at all. Those are just presentations that were thrown at us whenever we went off a split or something. But um, those kind of informed us quite a lot, and also it made it easier for us to think about where we wanted to play some of the Telestrator segments, because we felt like, at least I felt like, some of the Telestrator segments were best put before the day at all, like during waiting room, so you can have that expectation before the game. Sometimes, a lot of times, we'd put those Telestrator segments before a game if it's super relevant. So like if we have a Cloud9 versus EG series, perfect. we have a Cloud9 Telestrator segment that we're going to have, so let's place that before the series is pregame. And I think that's a really good way to inform while still being entertaining. Like we don't want that to be a bore, but we're going to try and make it as concise, quick, entertaining as possible for the people at home. And then for other times when we have like a fun segment, a lot of the times those segments we think perform quite well regardless, and those are really evergreen. And by evergreen, I mean like you can just place them anywhere at any time. Um, a lot of times we don't want to waste that at the early parts of the show because that's not where a lot of the viewers are. So we'll just put that either at the very tail end of the broadcast where we can still retain entertainment. Um, I think that's the biggest game. And you're right. The balance I think is the hardest one because there are going to be some weeks you come out and you're like, wow, we just did not have any fun segments, or wow, we did not really have like many informative, educating content on the broadcast. Like we need to fix that. And so to me, it kind of really is on us as talent to recognize when, hey, we have a pretty, we're lacking some substance. We're not really having any hard hitting analytical pieces of content. We need to put that in. And there are some days where it's like patch day. Literally, a huge patch change comes out, a new champion comes out. We need to talk about it. So we need to do a breakdown on that champion. And our producer is great at being able to be like, hey, you know what? This champion is going to be playable. It may not be popular. Like we're not going to be seeing Nefiri at all, but when Nefiri is going to get picked, we should probably have a piece of content ready to talk about her. So to answer your question, I don't think that's a choice that we made between like we can't have analytical content or we can't have entertain. I mean, yeah, I think everyone knows that we have entertainment-based content, but the challenge is we need both for our community, and we need to know where is the best place to slot that in. And a lot of times we look back in feedback sessions and we're pretty scathing in those feedback sessions and saying, we didn't have like I didn't feel like we had enough analytical content, or we didn't feel like we had enough like fun, engaging content. Because there are times where there's a fun, engaging content idea that's out there, but no one's really like positioned to. No one's really passionate about it. So we go into that feedback meeting asking like why, is it a missed opportunity, or is there something better that we could have made instead? That's where I think it's at.
I like hearing that. I like hearing that thought process. But I think more my point was, you mentioned the example of like if you have an EG versus C9
Yes.
matchup, you might want to talk about it before in the pregame to really hype it
Yeah.
up. Why does that not live pregame? Why is that not out a day before broadcast? Why does that have to be limited to the broadcast? I think I mentioned this, but I think the broadcast has done an amazing job. You guys are really good at making the broadcast entertaining this year, especially this year, even in previous years. But I do think that you've limited yourself to the broadcast, and if you're not getting people to watch it, you're getting people to stay on it.
So we do have hype. What's it called? Maybe not reels, but you know how like LEC will have like an LPL will have their match of the week that they highlight well before the show. They make a video piece on it, lives on TikTok and everything. We have that too, but we don't call it match of the week, which I've personally always like had an issue with that, because what better way to highlight the fact that this is the most important match of the week by literally putting a title on it. But we do have it. It just doesn't get enough eyes. It lives on the LCS Twitter channel, it lives on the YouTube channel, but generally is like that's where when I said earlier that it's kind of archaic or dated, those are the videos that are supposed to hit that for the audience and for you as well. And it just doesn't get any eyes, and so a lot of the times our challenge is to be a lot more engaging there. So if it's the best match of the week that's going to be coming out in 2 days, I'm going to do it personally on my own channels, do a better job at hyping people to like put that on their calendar. And I know that for sure going into next year, that's a goal too, is to be better at promoting our best games before the before the weekend starts. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, that's same frustration.
So I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I have
Okay.
seen you guys posting them. I didn't actually realize that you guys moved away from calling it match of the week, but I definitely will pay attention to that moving forward. It's more of like, okay, you have this segment. It might just be you talking. It might not be the old school, old fashioned like hype video and like watch this,
Uh,
Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Just actual segments of, Kobe talking about it on the dive, chop it up, make it into there's also the other thing where like the LCS doesn't really recognize the culture of a platform, where you will take one thing and try to put it everywhere, where the lingual, the type of content that's popular on TikTok might be very different than what a YouTube short or on YouTube would be, which is different than what people on Twitter might want to see. And I don't think I think the LPL has recognized that that's something that they understand more, and you'll see some like very silly TikToks from the LPL, like two minions fighting while
yeah,
everyone else is
I
doing their,
loved it so
and it's
much.
like a million views and like
Yeah,
500,000 likes, like something crazy like that. And it's like it's two minions fighting, but it's like TikTok. That's what people watch
yeah.
on TikTok. And like you look at YouTube, they're not putting that on their YouTube. They're putting other stuff. So I do think there's like the culture of a platform that needs to be understood. I'm not saying it's easy. Don't get me wrong. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But I do think that there's a way of going about it where it's not okay. Let's create new pieces of content for every single off broadcast content. There can be something like that, like the dive, or maybe a new show that's like more
Mhm.
analytical or more entertaining, just to bring people in. But I do think that segmenting some of the stuff that you guys have done and putting it where people's eyes are, you were saying that it doesn't get the views, like it just doesn't get views. Well, that's because it's just not good,
Yeah, that's
and
what I
it's
meant
not
when I said
there. Yeah,
archaic.
it's like
Yeah.
it's not. First of all, even if it was good, if you're not pushing it out to the people in the way that like they understand on that culture, then I don't know if you use TikTok at all, but there's a very common like trend on TikTok now. It's like we're blank, like, oh, we're comp sci majors, we're gamers, we buy a game and play it once, like this type of thing is happening. And I never see, you'll see some big companies like Pepsi, like Duolingo, like that really understand marketing, they're on that train. But I don't see
Yeah.
the LCS like do that. Whereas LPL, sometimes if something silly is happening and people are talking about like on TikTok, their TikTok might actually make something using the same sound, using the same. I think there's a lot there, and I think that the LCS needs to do a better job at it, and I think the teams do too. But I will push back and say that the LCS content is awesome, but I don't think you do a good job bringing them there.
So I don't even think you're pushing back because I pretty much agree on that holistically. And
Okay.
that's what I mean when I say we need to promote ourselves better and we need to have a better content that lives in our YouTube channel, but also when we so a challenge that we have right now is that you probably actually have seen this because you've done quite a bit of research too. So like a great example is our tenacity video that we had at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that was just like this was a content piece that Mark and Jat did with tenacity, where he was just talking about like all his, I think it was like his kit, like a routine that he does. And it was just basically about like how does he like do his hair in the morning, blah blah blah. Like I thought it was really cool. And it was perfect for TikTok. But the way that it was framed and the way that it was put on TikTok was not entertaining at all. And also the title of it as well. I think anybody that is an avid TikTok watcher or like TikTok creator will look at that video and I'm like, yeah, it's not going to be successful. Miss Chimchin actually had a TikTok herself, literally reacting to it, and it went far. Her reach on that same TikTok video went much farther, and it was just the way. Of course, she's a TikTok creator. That was a specialty of hers. Of course, she knows how to be able to frame that TikTok properly, have a title that's engaging enough for the audience, and I think that's a challenge that we need to be a lot more modern at. So when I say like we need to modernize in how we promote our stuff, it's like a catch-all term. I'm not gonna lie, but the in depth of it is basically saying that we need a person in charge of content that is able to um, create engaging content or the engaging content that we already have be able to push that in its proper platform. Um, and that's a lot of the feedback that we have internally. Like there are some things that we throw out there as an idea. I'll throw you like one small idea that's just it's a throwaway. It's not like gonna do much as in creating new content, but it's a great way to promote. So something ESPN does pretty regularly is like they clip their shows. Not a lot of people watch cable, and not a lot of people are gonna subscribe to ESPN Plus or anything like that. So for Fish Take and all of their shows, they're like, okay, we have an entire YouTube channel based off clip content, and actually a lot of the current Twitch creators like Nemesis, Double Lip, they literally have a separate channel for just clip content. Best things that happen on the show, be it a moment within the game or be it just a reaction to a moment. They'll just clip it, put it on that channel. Those channels live on their own. They're super successful, and they promote the stream that they're on. I think that's something that we should have. But when you say, I think that's something we should have, then there are going to be questions on how we get that done, and that'll take time. So that's like one example. But all of what you said is, for me, I think that's pretty well known. It's not even just an LCS specific thing. I think it's just a LoL esports thing. But the LPL English content, I love that you mentioned that one. TikTok, the editor they've hired for TikTok and on I think YouTube. Actually, YouTube, they borrow a lot of stuff from their main broadcast, but a lot of the stuff they have on their TikTok and Twitter accounts, excellent. And Instagram Reels. Like, I guess they got the person from their TikTok to their Instagram Reels, and they had a really talented video editor, and they just let them go, it seems like. And I think that's something we should be able to do more too. So now, can I tell you what our idea is around that? No. I'm a freelancer at the end of the day, and I think like my goal is to provide as much feedback while helping along the same road. So I will say confidently that I know that's going to get better. I just can't tell you what those goals are.
All right. I'm glad to hear that it will get better because I will watch LPL games that I wasn't actually hyped about because YSKM did like a really cool outplay, and now all of a sudden I want to watch this game.
Yeah.
I'll watch a basketball game because I'll see like Jordan Poole miss like 10 shots in a row on the Wizards, and I'm like, okay, now I want to watch that game. But I don't feel that way with the LCS and even the LEC, but I think this is more specific to the LCS. So I do think that even if it's just like eyeballs, people seeing stuff, like making stuff, I hope to see more of that.
Absolutely. And I think on top of that being a goal for the broadcast, what I can say more confidently, because I know what I'll be doing and I know what like the analysts that I'm working with are going to be doing. Like, we can all do our part in promoting our teams, our players, and stuff like that. Like, for example, I know that Cloud9 did their merch drop or something for One Piece,
One Piece, yeah.
and they had a merch drop that came out, and they were like just in Venice Beach for a pop-up shop. Of course, like, they're the ones promoting it. No one else is promoting it. I think we can do better at that. We should be promoting what our fellow teams are doing. And then they picked up JoJo. Let's hype up JoJo. That's the Cloud9. That's our top team. That's fair. Recently, Immortals, I know a lot of people have been criticizing the roster pickups because there are so many talented players that are right now teamless. That's a problem. But there are going to be some roster choices that I really like and I think people should be excited for. So I streamed watching specifically Mask play in EU Masters, and now my goal is to try and promote Mask either on YouTube or Twitter. And just like, that's one specific example, but I think that off the broadcast we can make content about our players and highlight them so people are excited about them rather than kind of dragging their feet because of all the negativity that's surrounded in the league. And what we can do and we can try to bleed that in the broadcast by trying to make more content for it. Now, some of the challenges you said, you're specifically saying, so like some of those Telestrator segments, maybe we can push that a few days beforehand. But that's more of a complication of the moment because we can only really film the Telestrator segment when we get there on the show day. Asking to do it beforehand, I think, is actually going to be, I'm sure that's going to be a cost. That's something I haven't even asked about, but I know for sure, like, having the studio people working on the day, including like the building, I'm sure it's probably, there's going to be some extra cost to that and using the studio when it's not a studio day. And also now it's a multi-game studio, so even it's like, what day would you even do it on? I realized I forgot about that too. So that part's going to be hard, but what isn't going to be hard is just being better at literally promoting our games before the days happen. So I think everything you said was right.
All right, awesome. At the end of this interview, is there a place where people can find you? Do you have a specific piece of content that you're going to be making that you want to promote? Anything you want to shout out?
Well, you can follow me at Razlol on Twitter. At the moment, first step in my goal is just to stream more regularly. That is something I need to constantly kick my own ass for. I don't stream enough, so I'm trying to push myself to do that. I'm gonna be making YouTube content. I need to figure out the specific day, so I'm not gonna be making like a plastered announcement on when I'm gonna be doing that. But the first thing I'm gonna be doing is talking about tier lists. I want to do tier lists of the teams in our league, so just a ranking of that, and maybe make content for promoting a new player that's coming into the league. So that's going to be the new idea. We'll see. I'm going to put that on Twitter whenever that happens, but follow me there.
All right. And before we finish, I'm not sure if I'm going to leave this in the interview or not, but I have a piece of content that I'm making for Boogie. Have you seen what I made for Insanity, or not really?
I haven't, no.
Okay. I'm planning. I've been working on it for some time. I think it's really cool. But can I get like 15 to 30 seconds of you talking about why other teams should be afraid of Boogie? And
for sure.
it's sort of a play on he's the boogeyman, but
I like that a lot. I can just go straight into it.
So I decided not to leave that in. The Boogie video is looking pretty good. It should be out soon. This video, interview with Raz, should be out around Thursday. You're watching it obviously, so it's out. Should be a few more days, and then the Boogie video should come out. I just want to say thank you again to Raz for coming on. I want to say thank you to you guys for watching. If you have any feedback, I'm trying to improve the audio quality, the video quality, and just my question asking and interviewing quality. So if you have any feedback, please let me know. And subscribe so you don't miss out for more. It also helps me get more guests and more people to interview. Right now I'm not very well known, so it's kind of difficult. So the more you guys like, share, and subscribe, the easier it is for me to get more of these kind of videos. And let me know what you thought about the whole conversation.